So we're just gonna softly get started while Sasha's waiting for her mother to arrive.
Sorry, my mother. I'm quite rare in Moscow recently, and my mother is missing me, so she wanted to join, and she's coming.
I wish my mother could be here.
Yeah.
She was really curious about how this talk would go, since she is a journalist and was fascinated by me being in Moscow in the first place. And also she doesn't know that much about my art.
Maybe you didn't speak about it?
I try to explain some things to her about what I do and about my work, and I think there's a language that goes with this art world that somehow doesn't really land with her. Is that true for your mother as well?
In fact, I think that I became an artist because she supported me in one moment. Then I wanted to enter the art school. It was her who brought my documents because I didn't have the opportunity to do it. So, and she supports me in my study because I thought that probably it's too late for me and too late to change anything. So.
What do you mean change anything? Because you started with physics, or do you mean something else?
Yeah, at that time I was 24 and I was thinking that I'm too old to change my life, so I have to just to continue how it's going. And yeah, that was a great, huge decision to start my art courses.
I made a similar decision after university because I studied international relations and had intended on a career in humanitarian work, I guess. I wanted to work for an NGO or a charity organization of some kind. I wanted to travel and then...
But you are close to your thoughts.
In some ways I am. But in other ways, I'm really glad that I'm not in that world anymore.
And have you finished your study in this humanitarian?
Yeah. I got the diploma, and then with my friend who's here, drove across the United States and decided to become a dancer.
And what was your first piece?
It actually happened that summer. It's a piece called Love Well.
What?
Love Well, like a well of love. And the idea behind it was that you could, no matter what the obstacles were, you could always find a way to experience love. So let's say it's in an object, or in a relationship, or despite being drunk. In the piece I drink a lot. That your mind and your body are always powerful enough to find the path towards love. And in the piece I basically just take a shot with one person. It's a one-on-one performance where you're facing one person, and then I put headphones on their ears and they listen to a song called Cross by Justice, which is funny because we do it in this variation. We cover it, and then I just touch their face for about 5 minutes.
So it was your first piece? So
yeah.
I attended your first piece.
Well, I kept, oh yeah, that's the one that you attended, yeah. But that wasn't the first time I did it, but yes.
Probably. I just want, it was like very nice surprise that I met Louise 2 years ago, almost 2 years ago in Berlin. And I saw many people, but that particular performance really influenced me a lot and really gave me some, I don't know, some feelings inside. And in Berlin it was quite, quite valuable. This sincere, very delicate and very, very human thing.
Thank you. Yeah, it's
No,
unbelievable to me
really.
that you did that piece with
Yeah.
me.
Unfortunately, I still didn't find the poem.
Oh, yeah.
But it was something very like, oh, Sasha, Sasha, Sasha.
What was your first piece?
Huh. Well, I wanted to be an artist, but I didn't know how to do it and what does it mean. And then at first I was, let's call, inspired by what I saw. And my first piece was created in the on video dance laboratory, and we went to small city Yaroslavl for
Near where?
here in Russia. And for 2 days, and we had a task to find some place that will produce some choreography, not produce, will, how to say, will lead to some movements and some activity. And so we were 2 of us, and we found very big, let's call it lake of mud with a railway, and where a real tram passed. And so we just picked one piece of this railway, and we started to move towards each other, and then we tried to find a way how to switch our track. And it was very hard because it's I don't know, 5 centimeters of metal, and every 5 minutes tram passed, and the height, the deep of this lake was quite, I don't know, 20 centimeters. And so I think we filmed around 30 attempts, and only the last was successful because we fell down or someone passed. So, and then I understood that art, it's not so easy thing.
It's not what?
So easy thing. It's quite you.
So you fell in
you
the
need
mud.
to suffer a bit.
Yeah.
To get the result.
Yeah.
But also it was my first positive reaction on what I did.
Falling in the mud.
No, from the viewer. Then it was
really?
Yeah, it was video. So then people saw it and really felt this reaction, and that was first time. Then I understood it. That's it.
So you started working with film and embodied performance type work or choreographic situations at the same time?
No, I had the movement, not background, but I would say interest quite a long time. And many people, all, almost all people who are interested in performance in Russia, they don't have opportunity to study seriously something here, so they go to workshops, summer schools, workshops abroad, some schools also abroad. And so I did it, but once I'm just trying to ask myself why I'm doing it, because, well, to be a dancer, I think you should spend much more time and energy on it. And then I just felt happy then I was doing it. And then I understood, okay, if I'm happy, so it's right way. And so it's was the first step probably to be an artist.
I'm curious about the relationship at the moment between like when you say some people go to workshops in schools in Russia and some people go to workshops in schools in Europe, what do you think like are the advantages and disadvantages of one or the other? Or like what if you were speaking to yourself as an 18-year-old about to enter art school, what would you recommend? Like what course of action would you recommend?
If I were 18, of course.
Or however old you are when you decide to take art seriously.
I think art should start to be made when a person is quite, how to say, then it feels responsibility for this choice, that it's not some occasion or just like interest of a young person. But if to speak about dance, of course, I think it should be like the body should be trained and trained every day. But on the other hand, there is a question that the brain also should be trained in the same time, because only the combination of these two can create like some interest result. And that's a question: what should be before, like brain or body? And
yeah.
In my case, it was brain,
yeah.
then body.
But then, like, what? But still, like, what would you recommend to your 18-year-old self? Like, would you say to her, go to dance school, or him? Yeah. What would you say to her or him? Like, go to dance school, go to Europe, go younger, at a younger age to Russian art school, or?
It depends on goals. At 18, I think nobody has like straight goals what to do.
Fair enough.
So it's better to do like after 20.
It's not like you know really anything.
Yeah, I'm 30, so I know something.
Yeah.
But as you told that you were studying some science, not science, but some, sorry, but some...
Like political science?
Yeah.
Sort of.
Political science, but how you started to dance? What moved you to work with your body?
I was really young, and I guess my parents had a VHS video of like Swan Lake or some sort of ballet, and I remember being really, at the time, really interested in the clothing and the shoes, like the tutus, and really just I romanticized the aesthetic aspect of ballet a lot, and then I just started doing it.
So you
like,
did it?
Yeah.
Parallel?
I did it in parallel for the whole time I was studying. Yeah.
So you did this combination of brain and body?
Yeah.
And on what are you working now?
Right now I'm working with an archive, and I think I'm starting the kind of idea behind working with an archive was finding a way to follow instructions and be told what to do so that I could focus on other things like how to perform it, how to compose with it, how to read a text, and then how to make a piece out of it. So basically it's a project where I read dance scores, like instructions for dance, and I compose and I make pieces with them.
Do you just read or you move?
I do them. I execute the scores.
Instructions.
Yeah.
But what do you think? Will it produce some form, or are you interested in some improvisational beauty of this
Not
process?
really. I think I'm more interested in the in the like thing that happens when I realize that I don't know what it is exactly that I want to make, but that the process of following the rules makes me see spaces within which I can like have artistic agency, basically. Like the process of executing these scores, in that process, a lot of stuff happens. And so I'm making work with the material that comes out of the process, inclusively, if that makes sense.
And
did that make sense? Like,
no, I'm trying to imagine. And what part the viewer plays in this process? Is he participant or is he just detached person? One more question. and yeah, and on what level you want him to be part, if you want?
I guess it's the relationship that I have with the archive is something that I need the viewer to imagine. And when I'm performing, the viewer has been given the information necessary to know that that everything that I'm doing on stage comes out of this archive. And so it's actually not that different than putting on a play in a contemporary way. It's just that my process of interpretation is what is highlighted, and how I choose to kind of mix and mash up the scores is for the viewer to guess and like make like project information and meaning into.
So you want him to make some imaginary work? Probably it's not correct.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's hard to say. Also, like, what you're seeing on stage in the performances is something already. So there's what I'm doing on stage, there's the text that helped me made it, and then there's the viewer's like projection of what the relationship is between me and the archive and what's happening. Yeah. I guess I also like want to have a relationship to text that's visible, and I want to have a relationship to other people, whether they're famous or not, and I want to somehow turn the in the solo that I made, I wanted the outcome to be some reflection of the environment that I'm in, the dance scene that produced this archive, and that was yeah.
And do you think about some? Do you have the beginning of the work and the ending? And does it mean some transformation of the viewer and of his perception?
Like at the beginning?
I mean, during the whole piece.
No, I don't try to control it, or yeah.
No.
Is that what you meant?
No, it's not about control. It's about, do you think about it or not?
That's funny, because I asked you a similar question when we were in the coffee shop. You said that there's something about the Russian viewer that has, there's kind of a hard shell, and that once you pierce it, there's a really like complex and beautiful world inside that you're trying to access with your work. And that's why I asked you if you think about the Russian viewer in particular when you make work. And I can't remember what you said.
Yeah, now I'm thinking, if I really think about Russian viewer or not Russian, or, I mean, of course they are a little bit different because of the context and like mental codes, not mental, yeah, national codes. But my starting point of my work that like we are all human beings, and like all human beings we feel the same, the same. And I mean, sometimes you need to be more delicate, or sometimes you need more to be more, you know, straight. Yeah, in fact, I don't think that I really think about Russian audience. I think I'm just think that here it is less prepared, and probably here I teach, I taught myself to be as simple as I can, to be more understandable as it's possible in this situation. Because, yeah, I think you should be very precise to like get into this center, center of each person. It's like, I also started to think about my physics background since 2 years, and sometimes I have images that connects me to physics. And here I think about quantums, and like, yeah. Because if something is like big and complex, like big object, it's really very difficult to penetrate inside other material, other matter. And if it's like simple and small, it's like quantum that penetrate everything, every matter. So I'm working to create these small quantums.
I feel like I have so many questions about that.
It's my first time that I discuss this combination.
Quantum physics?
Yeah.
In this
I'm not professional in quantum physics. It's just my images, how it works.
So the big object is more complex, and the smaller one is quantum, and it's the one that can pierce.
Yeah. It's model.
Yeah. And so in that way, when you say simplify, you're trying to find, it's also something that helps you to like penetrate this shell you were talking about and access this beautiful world within the viewer. I feel like this is actually a very interesting difference between our work. And maybe it's better, like you guys heard me trying to explain the different levels that I'm working on with this archive, and it's a bit, it's not exactly something that I can say directly, or it's more like there's a space that I'm trying to create between these three different focal points: what you see, what you know I read, and what you interpret. And the space is what I'm trying to like hone or create. And I'm often trying to create kind of like constellations. And a writer that I love, whose name is Rebecca Solnit, wrote a book called The Faraway Nearby. where she talks
Far away, what?
the far away nearby, like the far that's close. There's already a kind of space or a contradiction there that I feel like is really, it's like some kind of paradox or complexity that is really interesting. And it's a book about her mother's journey with Alzheimer's and her apricot tree and an artist that she knows who died of AIDS and Iceland. And so there's just like a lot of different facets, and the book is like a kind of a diamond. So I can't I can't really tell you what the book is about without somehow giving you the outlines of it. But I mean, I think it's an interesting kind of difference.
So you're creating some kind of map?
Maybe, or...
Tree?
And I'm not sure I'm being so successful at it, but but the idea, I think, is to, like, even with Lovewell, that there's like certain actions that happen, there's text that's used, there's one experience that happens in the same way with hundreds of different people. There's agents that come in and disrupt the situation, all of this so that hopefully something can like emerge from the space that's left. It's not simplified. It can't penetrate. It's more like it's trying to allow something else to come through.
So in terms of physics, so you create some matter around the viewer, and so the viewer is, let's call, penetrated this matter.
Maybe, yeah. Yeah. Maybe I'm just trying to create a situation where the viewer can penetrate my work. Maybe. I don't know. I have a question.
Yeah?
When you're simplifying, what do you get rid of?
Get rid?
Like, what do you get rid of? Yeah.
Then I create a work. At first I have like probably also this kind of a map, and then I understood that some decisions are very complicated, that I can't even explain it in very simple ways. And then I'm trying to find the most simple decision and the most simple idea in this huge bubble of my first ideas. And it's not like I'm getting rid of something, it's more about I'm finding these pearls in this strange bubble, and I'm just living probably at first like 5 of them, and then trying to live only one. That will be like...
Only one?
Yeah, I think recently I understood that I started to explain my work only in one word. So this work is about this.
What was the one at the Russian pavilion, if you had to say one word for it this summer?
Ow.
Ow?
This work is... no, it was the work before. It's about light.
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 You said when we were at the coffee shop that didn't you say something about death also? That you're quite...
Yeah, but it was like pre-basis of the idea that led me to light.
Okay. When you're working, do you feel like it's more inspiring for you to see other work or to do physical research or read books or talk to people, write?
Yeah, it's interesting because many people work like trying to get some information, making some research, and I and I like to go to some performances. Yeah, I have to. In fact, I'm just doing my thing, and then just observe very carefully what is going on outside the world, and then picking something that somehow plays in my bubble of ideas, and so it somehow shape this bubble and help me find the way to these pearls. And also, I really like to speak to people, and but no, I used to. Now I prefer to be alone with myself and just to be like very active in catching something around, because I have some question that is like existing in my head, and I just need to be very careful to find the answer outside or inside.
You sent me a video of this exhibition you went to go see last week.
Which one?
Of people like dancing in these kind of punky outfits, and you said it was super fresh. Do you remember? And they're from like a... Can you talk about that? Because I have a question, a follow-up question about it. And actually, before you say, I just wanted to say to the audience that anytime you want to ask a question, feel free. You're more than welcome to participate in in this discussion. Like, I think we will open it up for questions eventually, but if you feel like it, don't hesitate to raise your hand.
I think since a year ago, I started to, I think like several months ago, I started to observe the situation of contemporary art, and I started to be more and more frustrated about the lack of life in it, and lack of freshness, lack of sincerity. And also after Venice Biennial, Documenta, I was more and more frustrated, and now I'm very excited. Then I see something really sensitive, really pure, and in this context, I'm really thinking that Russian art and Russia has some potential, because the system is not so strong here now. And for example, there was the show, and it is now, about Vladivostok artists. And Vladivostok is very far from Moscow, and so they did art just because, I don't know why. And I saw like very, like probably a little bit 90s but really a very fresh, like, performance there. People really like enjoy what they are doing without thinking.
And when you say fresh, I sort of think that you are talking about something that is, or when you say pure, you mean that it's not like influenced by trends or Europe or media or whatever. Is that what you mean?
On one hand, yes. On the other hand, that is going from inside.
Yeah.
And it's like really like something that you can't stop. It's just like fountain of that you don't stop with brain activity, how you should shape this fountain. That sometimes I think happens with some artists.
It's been so interesting for me to be in Moscow because I've traveled a lot in my life, and I've traveled to
I've never seen something like that.
Yeah, basically I'm going there. I've been to quite a few places in different parts of the world, and I feel like I've never been somewhere that's so foreign to me. And that would make sense because I'm American born, and my upbringing...
In fact, I didn't know that you're American.
Yeah, I was born in the US, I have an American passport, but from the age of 6, I lived in Paris, France, and now I live in Berlin. So my understanding and knowledge about Russia is really, it's basically nothing. For lack of a better word, it's nothing. Yeah. And I've been having lots of really interesting conversations with people, including one today with Sasha, who's here. And she grew up here, and she's also American-born. And there's, from my outsider's perspective, there seems to be this really specific and really fertile kind of space that's not a European space, and that's not a conservative nationalist space. And I guess I wanted to hear if you agree with what I'm saying, or if that's has nothing to do with it. But I also feel like that space is being gentrified by European kind of ideas, and it seems crazy because it's also a place that doesn't exist in so many countries because the Russian narrative is so specific in my eyes.
I think it exists in Moscow, this gentrification, and attempts of taking experience from outside but not creating your own experience. But I just back from Yekaterinburg. They are participating in the Ural Biennial. That was really a little bit complicated experience in terms of organization and installing. And there were quite many foreign artists who were invited, who on the first days of installing were really very upset, furious, nervous, and then in the end of when everything was finished, and they really told that they really like Russia because it's a place with with craziness and with something that you don't expect, and that with chaotic place where it's quite hard to find something, I don't know, to predict something, but if you find something something good, it's really very good. It's really like the best. And so, well, it's hard to say because there are lots of things that should be should be changed. But this like craziness and this yeah, it's something that really attracts and that you can't find anywhere else. And yeah.
Do you feel like you experience that with your family? As like that kind of craziness, or everywhere all the time, or in the art scene, or in the on the interpersonal level, or is that a cultural thing that's taught, or can you be more specific about
Craziness?
Yeah.
I mean, I just write from Yekaterinburg. All my thoughts are...
And where is that? Can you
It's on the Urals.
And where is that?
It's in the east, I mean, in the direction of east, in the like more or less center of the Russia.
In the center?
Yeah.
Okay.
Craziness. And I'm still a little bit emotional about the process, and I don't think I should say something about it now.
Sounds good.
Because it's probably some that should be kept, that should stay in Yekaterinburg. What was in Yekaterinburg, stay in Yekaterinburg. I think it's like general feeling about everything, and you can find it everywhere on like personal level, on even how to say more official level, because I mean you feel that everything is getting more restricted, but something like beautiful happens, and it's just in the air. And didn't you feel it?
Yeah, I think I've felt it a little bit when I'm working in this variation, in the piece with Tino Sehgal. There's always something pretty crazy that happens depending on the visitor, but we've had we've had a really like amazing time performing that work here, because people really take advantage of the darkness in a way that they don't in other countries, I think.
Could you say something?
Yeah,
I'm
like,
really curious.
I think
how the audience here react.
In my opinion, I think everybody who's in the work has a different perception of this, but in my opinion, in Europe, a common experience is that you kind of take advantage of the audience sometimes. I guess I'm talking about the loud audience members that we notice when we're performing, or like the people who really are like externally experiencing the work. I would never be able to say anything about the others, but in Europe, I think there's often the kind of visitor who takes advantage of the anonymity, who makes himself heard, who uses it for I don't know how to explain it better than takes advantage of the space. And here I have felt like people use the darkness in a way that's like it just kind of relaxes them in a different way. Like People burst into song. People come and dance and say that they never dance normally, even in a club. Yesterday I saw a lesbian couple just like not making out or anything, but really holding each other tenderly. And in Europe, people just make out in there all the time, like and nobody's done that here, but there's a kind of tenderness. Yeah, I don't know, I guess it's just felt really...
And do you feel that with this piece you managed to break this shell and to open these particular worlds of visitors?
Maybe. I'm not sure. I mean, it really depends on the person. But yeah, I mean, it's felt good to do it here.
And while you were doing this piece, were the times that there was nobody in the space?
Yeah.
There was. And okay, I don't know, but I just tried to imagine the situation that there is like zero audience.
We just lie down and chat and stop working.
Really?
Yeah. Sorry.
I was imagining that the piece exists even though there is no audience.
I think you're supposed to imagine that.
Yeah, probably I became part of your piece. So coffee stopped. I just had plain today.
Does anybody have any questions? Yeah.
Architectural Museum. Sorry. I've been there yesterday in the Architecture Museum and I witnessed some crazy stuff that someone was arguing about modern applications for mobile phones, this identity securing stuff and all this shit. And after the songs looped, this thing haven't looped. So I've seen you just speaking without, out of the script. Yeah? Or this was a part of the situation?
Well, there isn't a script, but I also I can't really speak for that work because it's not my work. And I would love to have a private, actually, that's not true. We can also talk about that work, but it's, I can't take responsibility for, your experience, yeah. Just saying.
I was just wondering if it was a part of the script or it was just improvisation of people who were there.
Everything you saw was a part of the script.
Can I ask a question? Why you need an answer for this question?
Sorry?
Why you need an answer for this question?
I'm a bit of paranoid and I'm always interested about the script, the structure. That's why I liked the stuff you were speaking about physics, but I'm not agree with that actually, but that doesn't matter. I just like the view.
You are not agree with what? With me?
Your idea of quantums passing through the objects.
Yeah, it's my theory.
Yeah, obviously. No, I just like to see the ideas behind what was for everyone. Like you said that you're trying to simplify your art, and I would like to call it like something not unique, but for everyone, like stimulation for everyone, the same start, which leads to the personal react. So I'm always interested what was for everyone and what was my original view. That's the point.
What was for everyone? And what was the original idea?
No. Obviously, I cannot see the heart of the artist through his work, but I can see what was shown to everyone, what I seen there. And
I guess I just meant that we can talk about your subjective experience or mine, but I just can't talk about the work.
yeah, that's obvious.
Yeah. And are you familiar with Sasha's work?
Unfortunately, no. I've seen her twice. I'm always very happy to see her face, always smiling, by the way, never seen her sad.
But it's not my work.
Yeah, obviously. But that's nice to see a smiling person always. We have one kind of famous electronic artist called Ishom. Maybe you heard about her. She's playing electronica techno, and she just asked her audience what I should do to stop looking like I just buried someone, because she never smiles when she is performing. Actually, I'm advising you to listen to her works, because it's kind of crazy. That's avant-garde of our electronics scene. If you're interested in this kind of music, you should try.
And I'm just asked the question why you need an answer for this question, because I'm really curious, because many people, then they saw work, they asked how it was made and like what was the material, and they need to know the process. And I'm really curious how this appears. It means that the work doesn't affect, that yeah, you need to know something, what is behind the work, or...
Yeah, I remember... Oh, sorry.
No, I'm just... It's a question. In the universe.
I was just bringing up what you were talking about earlier about being very explicit with kind of giving a description of the solo piece that you were talking about. How I don't know if you actually like hand out a piece of paper, but maybe you want to talk about that a little bit more.
Yeah, I mean, for this solo piece, I hand out a piece of paper to the audience and I tell them to read it. And when they're finished reading it, I can go on with the performance.
So they participated a lot.
Yeah, I guess so. So I did that because because Martin gave me some very good advice that the context of the work makes it kind of come alive. And so and also the archive that I'm working with was founded on ideas of transparency and accessibility. So I guess by having everybody read this text that I wrote while I wait for them to finish is a performative way of giving them, or like empowering them with the information that they need to make the piece happen. Without them having that knowledge, it would be like a random assortment of gestures and movements that doesn't really mean much.
Do you think that it has to do with like agency, like for the audience or something?
I guess when you go see a Beckett play, either the audience knows about Beckett or they don't. And a lot of people don't know about Everybody's Toolbox, and I guess like I wanted to do the same thing that Beckett, or that people who put on Beckett plays do, but with an archive that has basically been forgotten, even though it was a foundational document for a lot of contemporary performance in Europe. And one of the women who was really, who really made it come together, Alice Chauchat, I think she is a really important artist who also doesn't get enough recognition for those kinds of foundations that she laid about transparency, access. Yeah.
Is it important for you that it's a female artist who made this archive?
Well, it's not female artists. It's Alice and Meta, but it was a collective. But Alice's career is important to me because she's a woman. And she's actually of the same kind of scene as Tino Sehgal emerged from. Her and Xavier Leroy and Mette Ingvartsen and this kind of like group of white conceptual artists that were really trending in the early 2000s basically did a lot of stuff and produced a lot of interesting material, both text and performance-wise. And many of them, also Morten Spanberg, many of them have had careers that have skyrocketed, like Tino. And the ones whose careers have skyrocketed the most happen to be the men. And so it's also like part of that, like that's also part of my decision to work with that archive. It's kind of a compilation of information that was made for what I'm doing with it, but nobody's doing anything with it. And many of the artists who had scores online have taken their scores off and the website doesn't work anymore. I'm actually trying to get funding at the moment to work with a web designer to make this open source online platform more accessible and not more accessible because it exists, but more active.
After our conversation in the coffee shop, I really started to think about this female issue and started to like to pick something outside me. And yeah, I just understood how many things that I didn't notice before. And now, because I'm working with very like, let's call it basic images and basic feelings. And I don't work for the moment with something that like society produced. But on the other hand, I really appreciate that this work is being done. And what do you think is like the most important, I don't know, society issue that should be discussed or work on or rethought?
Which one do I think is the most important one?
Because you think about it more, I just want to...
Yeah. I think it's really it really depends on where you are and the socioeconomic situation. I think that the discussion that's happening in the US around race, for example, or gender, contains information that it would be great if everybody thought about it, but the way that it's being talked about wouldn't necessarily be that applicable to Russia, for example. And there's a lot that I don't know about Russia and politics here.
I'm speaking in general.
Yeah, for sure. I've been thinking a lot about it too since our conversation. Mm-hmm. And I feel like, anyways, ever since Black Lives Matter in the US, I've been which is a movement that happened like a year and a half ago where more and more people started realizing that black people in the United States were being killed by police, basically. It's an ongoing trend, and it kind of, yeah. And seeing how those issues were being talked about in Europe was just really interesting for me, because they're so important. Like the way we talk about race is so important, and it's not talked about in so many ways. But at the same time, I don't think that the way Americans talk about it is necessarily what's right for Russia or for Paris. I don't think the French talk about race enough or in the right way. But I also am kind of resistant of this, what I would call like dogmatic or imperialist American discourse around political issues. And at the same time, I think that you can make lots of really wonderful links and constellations, like I was saying about my work. Like between issues. So, for example, when I've spoken about feminism with people here, I've heard a lot of stuff about how that's not what's at the forefront of our minds, like corruption or imperialism or the decision about whether or not to vote is what's more important. And I think that you can make a relationship between feminism and those things. And this, for example, this author, Rebecca Solnit, that I mentioned, I just read an essay of hers that is about women's bodies on this planet and how they're so much more under threat than men's bodies. Like the number one threat to women's life is men, actually, statistically. And this is kind of about domestic abuse or whatever, and she kind of says, I'm an environmentalist. Like, I think that this is a moment in time when the environment is the most important issue on our planet. But I can't talk about the environment until we're all allowed to exist in it in the same way. So again, there she kind of like makes this really dynamic and paradoxical relationship between these things. And I just feel like more of that needs to be done.
But what do you think, what should be done? Because at Documenta, for example, there were like several topics that were discussed, but there was no suggestion how we can move forward, what we can do with it, how we can transform our life, our world, our way of living to create, let's call, another world. But what do you think? Is there the way how to do it?
I mean,
probably you thought about it.
Yeah, I have. I think what's interesting in art and like political art is that it's quite common for artists to point at political issues, describe them. Keith Hennessy, who maybe some of you saw his talk, is really good at like designating like the like kind of current political thing that's going on. And I think that's cool. But I also think that there are structures that are maybe feminist, that you can... I guess I'm talking about art right now. I'm not talking about the world.
Yeah.
But less like the
I just think that art can suggest something because it's like
Yeah.
a little bit look on the future.
Yeah. So I'm not so much of the camp of people who want to point, I'm not trying to point. I'm trying to embrace feminist methodologies, for example. And in the coffee shop, you said this thing about taking your feelings or your inner environment and reflecting it on the outside. And in my opinion, that's a feminist methodology because like there's a famous woman called Yvonne Rainier, correct me if I'm wrong, who says feelings are facts. Right? Yvonne Rainier. Yeah. She's a dancer. And this kind of reclaiming of the emotional landscape, which many associate more with women and femininity than with men, is like a feminist structure. And I think that if we are looking at, let's just for a second imagine that we're attacking the various problems on this planet from an emotional perspective rather than a financial one. Like, I don't want to sound too naive or idealistic or whatever, but these kinds of methodologies of saying like what I experience emotionally is a fact that needs to be addressed just as much as whatever, my job. So I like art that tries to have structures like that, or that uses only renewable materials to make art, or whatever. Like,
No, I think it's the way.
yeah.
Привет. I will speak Russian, okay? Грубо говоря, по случаю Тина Сehgala и работ, которые он делает, да? И мы когда с ним разговаривали про какие-то особенности его работ и его, так сказать, входа на территорию визуального искусства, в принципе, так или иначе, много раз затрагивали такую тему, что тему разности медиа, скажем так, да, разности медиа и форм. И, например, его запрет на документацию, да, его работ, это его, в принципе, четкая позиция была озвучена, что мне очень важно, что...
It's his position. He mentioned it's his position. The media, there shouldn't be any video, no photos in parallel to his work, so that no one thinks it's a piece of art, let us say. As I understand, both of you started working with live art or the performance, and you also at a certain moment you reached the video art. It's only me, Sasha says. Louise also is involved into video art.
Some video. Yeah.
Просто я знаю, что у тебя, например, ну как бы ты...
Yes, I know. Earlier, you also were involved into the video art, right? It's quite a long time that I didn't see your works. If video art is dominating what you are doing now, it's an interesting issue or situation. This is the contest. My question is, so you started the video art, then why you decided to do so? Why you quit the live art, the performance? Why you are engaged into the video art? In your works, Sasha, it's not just mediation of the image. So if there is such an attitude, why video, when video is dominating now? If in Louise's case, Louise stays in the live art, in the performance, then my question is why she prefers the performance, the live art. So, what are your individual attitudes towards these two different forms of art? Video.
Well, my first work, like first big video work, was filmed in the Russian State Library. And at first I was thinking to make a performance there in these spots and to make like a tour. But that was difficult to organize. And also I'm thinking that I have to like, to collect all my energy just for once. And then, but also I studied at video department. And so like there is some pretext of that. And so I made video work out of that because somehow in organizational terms it was easier in this space, for example. And then I really felt and I got like feedback from from professionals, let's call, that I just made my job well, and so it works. And then somehow I started to develop it. It wasn't like choice, I do that and I don't do that. It was like historical path. And last year I made 2 video works, and it was really hard and took lots of my energy. And now I'm thinking how to work with performance more. So it's not like something I chose, and I mean, sometimes it's just choice for particular work. No, because also I do work, I feel that I'm happy about that, but I do work for the exhibition. I don't do work like just work. So I know that will be exhibit for which show, what is the topic, and I have idea for video, for example.
Ну, то есть, грубо говоря, у меня тогда вопрос, почему
If you prepare certain work for the exhibition, why it's not a live piece? As Anna Teresa, for example, she does her technical work and demonstrate it in a museum. So why you make a particular choice in a particular situation? Once you choose a video...
Well, I like the situation that you ask me in Russian and I answer in English. We have a dialogue in 2 languages. I also think where I'm making a work. If it's Russia, it's easier for me to make video, because for me it's hard to find people with whom I would like to work, because I don't feel that there are many performers with whom I speak on the same language. And doing video, so video is a little bit another process. So I'm making some improvisational situation, then I document it in like cinematographic way, and out of this like huge amount of video material, I create this path of, I create different work, like another work. And so I can say that like 70% of my work created on the stage of editing. And if I work outside Russia, of course it depends on the project. It's just easier to find performers with whom I can make it like in short period, because also if to work with performance, you need to feel the group, you need to spend some time with people. And So it should be like group that you communicate very well. And so now I'm thinking how to work with performance, what it should be, what is the form, that you don't need to have so many rehearsals to make it like a little bit easier, but not in the but not to lose like sense and idea and feelings. And so just thinking about the form now of it.
For me, I just have always really loved performing. So it's not so much about it being live, but it's about people's attention. People, watching me do stuff. I feel like that kind of a situation allows me to be a good artist sometimes. I don't know. It's just something I feel comfortable with, and I like doing it. With video, I actually started using it as a tool to help me improvise and dance in a better way. Like, I have worked with one-on-one performances, like I was saying with Lovewell. And I started recording myself dancing in the studio one day, just doing something else. And I didn't like it, and then I decided to dedicate it, like make a short dance for somebody. And the process of making what I now call a dance gift, kind of the intention of giving it later, like via email to someone, kind of frees up the responsibility that I have, that I'm supposed to have as an artist over my body and my dancing. So it kind of became a tool for me to like dance better, or dance with more heart and feeling. And then I made another one-on-one performance that was about drone warfare, like military unarmed aerial vehicles. And it was kind of working with drones and with cam girls, like online prostitution. And so it happened through Skype. And so again there, the screen just became this kind of useful medium, or it was the medium that I was interested in, but the fact that there's someone watching, or that there's some kind of unidirectional gaze going on, or even like a power relationship, or an expectation, or an intention of giving, or attacking, or observing, surveilling,
And then you're making this video. Do you think about the moment then the person will receive it and will watch it?
No.
What is the most, like, I don't know, exciting for you in this process?
For the dance gifts, I think it's just that it's like a 5 to 7 minute period where I'm like making something, and somehow that's really satisfying, because you can spend hours in the studio like dancing around, and it's really frustrating because, I don't know, for me, like I feel like nothing's happening. But if I'm like making something that's recorded that someone will see and have, and it'll have a life, even if it's just 5 minutes of my time doing dance that I'm not really thinking about at all.
I have a question for Sasha. So you've both talked about how Russian art and non-Russian art is received in Russia and how it's interpreted in Russia. But then Sasha, you've also talked about the differences between how you would do work here in Russia and how you do work outside of Russia. And so I'm curious about whether or not you see a distinct purpose Russian art and Russian cultural production, especially contemporary art outside of Russia, and what that purpose would be for you. So for example, you took your work to Venice. Do you see in that a different purpose than you showing your work in Russia?
Well, I'm thinking about it since I think my first residency. Then I was like, when I went outside Russia for a long time. And we also spoke a lot about it in Yekaterinburg, because now there is really, I feel, lack of information about Russian contemporary art, I mean outside Russia. And so there is like old history, like Kabakov, something, and also political situation doesn't help to know anything about it. And so there is some gap. But I'm quite happy. I was happy to hear that, people with whom I talked, they told me that, for example, my works are not Russian. And I don't use like Russian visuality. I don't work with Russian context, and I even very picky in people whom I chose to film, because I really want them to look like international.
You need to kind of transcend your national context. Does that, for you, like, give your work more value?
No, I think it doesn't. Just it makes it more general. It's not about value. I mean, it's important for me not to like choose some direction, but be more. Be more general. And of course we spoke a lot about Russian pavilion, because it's like if you exhibit in Russian pavilion, you like emphasize that you are Russian somehow. But for me, it was important, to show work that is not pretend to be Russian, because this year it's especially politically sourced, and I wanted to have this light in the end of the pavilion. And it's quite, on one hand, funny for me. On the other hand, it's like some history of this work, but many people didn't notice my work in the pavilion because they are too influenced by the work of one of the artists who is like on the first floor. Because there is a way that the audience is entering the pavilion and then go down, and my work is in the end. And so the audience is so became so depressed after the first work and so overloaded with information, because there are lots of medias used. So they just trying to go out without seeing the whole picture. But for me it was important to make this piece, to make this situation lighter. Light. It's about light.
I was interested in what you were talking about in relation to creating or working with sort of like feminist structures, or sort of like engaging in like structures that have like feminist mentalities or whatever, and how that becomes like a kind of an underlying element of your work or something. And I was thinking about this structure that you spoke about of having these 3 different focal points, and then kind of seeing like what emerges or what exists in between, as I was thinking about this as one of these structures that you were talking about. And then I was thinking about your question about using video as a form instead of, or in relation to performing arts, and just thinking about, I have a few questions. Like, first of all, like one question is to you, Sasha. Do you think about your work as having political, structural kind of like undercurrents, or like is there a kind of is your work political, not in the sense of like, are you making political work or like about politics, but is the form of your work, does it have like political intention? And then also for you, Louise, like do you feel like you can work with that structure, those structural elements that are you, like when you're working with video, are you still enacting these feminist political structures? If that makes sense.
With video, I think I work a lot with like the kind of the feminine trope that is my like young white body, and I try to manipulate the situations in which it is, or in which I put it in the context of my work, to somehow move how dominant it is aside and make room for something else to happen. So in the drone Skype piece, for example, I'm really asking the question of what is connection? And in that work, again, the audience is kind of empowered with the information that this is about drone warfare, this is about death, this is about a victim relationship, like a military to victim relationship. This is about sex work, this is about like paid online prostitution. And still I'm asking the audience, what is our connection, and let's find one. So in that way, it's similar to Lovewell, that I'm kind of putting all these things out there, and rather than using them to like hit the viewer in the face or kind of attack the viewer with the content, I'm like asking the viewer and challenging the viewer to like come closer and figure out if we can have some kind of a real relationship. Or is my body too sexy? Does it remind you too much of advertisements? Is the way that I'm behaving making you uncomfortable? Is the way that I'm behaving like a victim making you more interested or less interested in this artwork or whatever? So I do kind of, I'm a bit, in that piece I'm quite like challenging, but the idea is still to make a space, I guess. I hope.
So I trying, not trying. So you always have this connection of your body in the context in which it exists.
Yeah, I think so. Also because I'm a dancer, so I can't not have that connection.
At first, I think I started to think about political issue since my first residency, and I just started to figure out these differences, and also at that moment there was like rubble became twice cheaper, and so prices here became twice higher, and it also was like moment of stressful situation. Then I'm outside Russia, and I just started to think about it more, and of course during this time I think about it more and more, and as thoughts in my head, like part of me, it's always exists in my work, but I don't emphasize it because I think political issue, for example, it's about borders and about restrictions, and I work with getting, how to say, outside these borders in general. That's why this political issue is not so interesting for me like it is, but in more general, because these borders and restrictions, they are everywhere, and I think it's what we should work on also inside us to change the situation. So it is, but very subconsciously.
Time is over. If you
I just feel that we need
comments to each
to
other.
finish somehow.
Yeah, we can finish up. We can say something, but if there's no more questions, that is. I'm really interested in the last thing that you said, and I think it's super cool and powerful to be borders in general are something that fundamentally impacts my art, even though my art isn't about that, and transgressing them is something that in the largest sense is a political, borders are inherently political. My body in space is inherently political in a way. And I think it's really cool to be I can hold all of that. Even if my art isn't political art, it can still contain all of that information. I don't know. We were getting a tour of this gallery, the group from Tino, Sehgal, and the wonderful guide that we had kept on being and this is where, you can see the universal in the landscape. You can see God, and then this is where you could see, at this period of time, this is where you could see the universal. And at this period of time, it was the landscape. And then at the end, it became, you can see it in the black square, You can have the universe. He kept on talking about this universal thing. So I feel it's normal to think in such broad terms, right? A lot of people do it.
Speaking about black square, today...
Sorry, we don't have to finish on that.
You didn't finish, sorry.
No, we are not finished yet.
No, I just want to say last phrase. I think we have quite complicated situation in the world in general, and it somehow, I feel that will lead to something new stage of society and life, and I think the first and predictable of it is art, and I think also some new ways, new forms of speaking about what we have should appear to speak about all of this very precise. And I'm just, I got many thoughts, and I'm thinking about it, what should be this forum. I'm very happy to get new thoughts about this feminine power. Yeah, so it's really very inspiring.
Yeah, same here. Meeting you has been really inspiring, for sure, and all the things we've talked about.
So thank you.